Hello and welcome to the Run Testers. My name's Nick. In this video we're going to be comparing the Brooks Glycerin Max and the Saucony Hurricane 24. Hurricane 24 and the Glycerin Max are both big cushion shoes from their respective brands. They are designed to be used mainly for easy runs, recovery runs, that kind of thing, and just in general logging a lot of mileage whilst protecting the legs from the impact of running. Saucony Hurricane 24 is the cheaper shoe. It's £165 or $160, whereas the Glycerin Max is $200 or £180. They're pretty heavy, both of these shoes, but the Glycerin Max is slightly lighter. It's 319 grams or 11.2 ounces in a UK 9, whereas the Saucony is 326 grams or 11.5 ounces in the same size. They both have a 6mm drop, but the Glycerin is the taller shoe. It is 45mm at the heel and 39 at the forefoot, whereas the Saucony is 38 at the heel and 32 at the forefoot. So the Glycerin Max is a new flagship shoe from Brooks that introduces a new foam to their lineup, which is DNA tuned. This is a nitrogen infused EVA, like some of the foams they've used in the past, like the DNA Loft V3, but the way it's set up means that they can tune the midsole a little bit differently, hence the name. So you've got larger cells at the back, which creates a softer feeling, and then smaller cells at the forefoot to create a slightly more responsive feeling. The yellow effect you can see on the midsole is actually a wedge of foam inside this outer foam that has the smaller cells that give you that more responsive feeling. You've got Brooks's glide roll rocker profile on the shoe. You've got a kind of thick and cushy upper that has a lot of padding around the heel and tongue, as you kind of expect from a Brooks cushion shoe, with a pretty significant internal heel counter as well. You've got a rubber outsole which doesn't have full coverage, but pretty thick wedges of it at the heel and forefoot. With the Hurricane 24 you've got a dual density midsole, which is mostly made from Saucony's Power Run PB foam, which is a PB based foam, and then you have some Power Run foam in there as well to kind of add stability to the shoe and cradle that Power Run foam, if you will. The shoe is a stability shoe. It uses Saucony's Center Path technology to create stability, so it's not really a traditional stability shoe. It's more in the mold of modern stability shoes that use things like a wide base, sidewalls of foam, and a rocker to kind of guide your foot into a neutral position rather than things like medial posting. You have an engineered mesh upper with a fair amount of padding around the heel and tongue, but not as much as on the Brooks, I would say. And then like the Brooks, you've got fairly sparing use of rubber on the outsole, but it's pretty thick and covers the key impact areas, and the grip has been very good for me with both of these shoes.
So in terms of the fit of the Glycerin Max and the Hurricane 24, I would say they definitely both prioritise being very comfortable shoes first and foremost. Those, making sure those uppers fit very kind of snug and naturally very roomy and accommodating. That's ultimately been my experience of these two shoes. Now, I've got them both in a UK size 8. That is my typical running shoe size. I would say going to size has been absolutely fine for me in both of these shoes. I haven't had any real issues to report in terms of my running experience. I would say the Hurricane 24, I'd say I describe the fit of being, compared to the Glycerin Max, feeling a touch more luxurious. It feels a little bit softer. It's probably a little bit less structured than the one or the upper on the Glycerin Max, but I think ultimately it gives you, as I said, a very roomy feel, definitely all the way from the kind of forefoot, the midfoot, and even to the back of the shoe as well too. So if you want something that definitely is going to feel very accommodating, whether you have narrow feet or wide feet, I think the Hurricane 24 is going to be a good fit. I think it's a similar story with the Glycerin Max, maybe slightly less wide, but still very, a very wide fitting shoe. I think maybe slightly more room in the toes for me, but not a huge amount in it. And the kind of space you want to see ultimately if you're going to use it for longer runs. And a similar level of padding in areas like the tongue, a kind of heel collar as well too, where I've had no kind of issues in terms of the lockdown, any kind of heel rub either. So I think from my point of view, I think they fit very well. They fit very well in my usual size. I would say the Hurricane 24 maybe is, a touch less structured in terms of that overall fit, but ultimately gives similar qualities in terms of that roominess, in terms of that comfort as well too. Whereas with the Glycerin Max, again, very accommodating, but maybe slightly more structured in terms of that overall fit and delivering that kind of roomier kind of design and fit overall.
The fit for me in these two shoes, pretty similar actually. They're both big, comfortable cushion shoes with a lot of space in the midfoot and forefoot for me. I'm a size 8 in the UK. Both of these shoes have probably more space than I would normally expect from a shoe in my size. But I find it very comfortable as a result. I don't have any problems with getting a lockdown fit in these shoes, so I would stay to my size in these shoes.
When it comes to fit of the two shoes, it's been good for me in my normal size. I've got a UK 9 with both, which is a US 10 for Saucony and Brooks. That's the size I use across both brands' ranges, and yeah, I've had no concerns with the fit at all. It's been comfortable for me. I've had no heel irritation from either shoe, despite the fact they are quite padded and have, you know, internal heel counters on them, which sometimes can annoy my Achilles, especially with Brooks shoes. But I think there's been a slight change in the way Brooks does the heel counter on this shoe, and yeah, I've had no problems with either of them, so I would stick to your normal running shoe size.
So both of these are shoes that I really like. I've been really enjoying running in the Glycerin Max recently. I'm a massive fan of Max cushion shoes. I like soft bouncy shoes. That's my thing. The Hurricane is a shoe that I was really surprised about. On paper, it sounds like a chunky, big stability shoe. And historically, I don't really like big, chunky stability shoes. But it doesn't ride like a big, chunky stability shoe. It rides like a cushion shoe that has a little bit of stability that's very, very subtle. That only really comes out if you're really trying to feel it, or if you really need some sort of stability in your shoe. So as a result, it's a shoe that's got a lovely rolling motion when you're out running in it. It rides a lot faster than what you'd expect from a big chunky shoe like this. And yeah, it's a really solid, comfortable cushion shoe to run in. It's not a particularly versatile shoe. It's still quite a big shoe. You can definitely feel it being a big shoe on the feet. It doesn't feel particularly heavy, but it's got this really wide base on it, which you wouldn't normally associate with running fast and picking up the pace and things like that. But it's very comfortable. So if you're going out for a daily run, if you're going out for an easy session, this is a fantastic shoe, and that stability is a really nice little feature in it, which sort of kicks in when you're doing longer sessions in it. So say you're running for, you know, over 20k, 30k, and you're getting tired at the end of the run. That stability kicks in, and it just feels like your foot's firmly on the ground, and it's nice to have that subtle level of stability in there that doesn't necessarily overwhelm you on the run, but is there when you need it. Really enjoyed running in this shoe, and for me, I'd say the Hurricane 24 is just a fantastic daily shoe, long run shoe to an extent, depending on how fast you do your long runs. I wouldn't use this shoe if I was doing faster efforts, tempo efforts, anything like that. But if I was just going out doing a 25k run, 30k run, and I wanted something solid, comfortable to run at my comfortable pace, which would be like 5 minute 15 kilometers, this is a great shoe for it. Lovely rocker action in it, which just keeps you moving. Lovely bit of transition and lovely bit of stability. So yeah, really like the Hurricane 24. Very surprising shoe. Now the Brooks Glycerin Max, massive fan of the Glycerins. Most of the previous versions, if not all of the previous versions of the Glycerin, I've been a big fan of, and obviously I like big cushioned shoes, and this is a very big cushion shoe. Now, when it comes to Brooks, quite often stability is largely baked into their range. They're very keen on all their shoes being quite stable, and sometimes it's to the detriment of the shoe, because sometimes you don't necessarily want the stability as much as you want some other things like bounce and energy return and stuff like that. But they've really got it right with Glycerin Max, because you really do feel that big stack of foam in there. It feels very comfortable. It's not massive, it's not the softest shoe out there, but you can definitely feel it. It's very comfortable to wear for easy runs, longer sessions, and it's got a bit of energy return in it as well, which is really nice for longer sessions. As well as all that, it's still quite a stable shoe as well. So it's really ticking a lot of boxes when it comes to that max cushion shoe, which a lot of shoes don't get right. A lot of shoes can have a max cushioning and they lose a bit of stability, and it means it's not as good or accessible for all runners. I think what Brooks has done here is taken a lot of the learnings from their shoes, kept things like stability in there, and managed to create a shoe that does feel like a max stack shoe, a cushion shoe, which is very enjoyable to wear, very fun, and also really helps you to run nice and consistently. It's very enjoyable to do a long run in this shoe. It just bounces you along subtly. It's not the most bouncy shoe in the world, but you can feel it in there along with that stability. And it's just a solid max stack option. It's definitely a shoe that is accessible to a lot of people, and if you are looking for a max stack cushion shoe, and you want something that is really solid and stable as well, I think this is a really good option. The other thing about these shoes as well is the outsole. So the outsole on the Brooks Glycerin Max, fantastic outsole on that. Really grippy, thick layer of rubber on there. Had no issues at all out on the run. I presume one of the reasons for that is that the midsole foam does feel a little bit more delicate than the foam that you get on the Hurricane 24. So definitely there's a good layer of that outsole rubber on there to protect the shoe, but also it is very grippy as well, so I've no issues out on the wet ground, and it is very, very wet at the moment. A Hurricane 24, solid outsole as well. It doesn't have covering on this big area in the middle bit here, but it also doesn't show showing that many signs of wear and tear for me, and I've probably done about 80k in this shoe so far. So yeah, good outsoles on both of these shoes.
On to the run test, I've logged a lot of miles in both of these shoes, including easy runs, long runs, some slightly faster stuff, but generally I've been using them for easy and long runs, which is what they're really designed for, and they are two very good cushion shoes, two of my favourite cushion shoes of the year. In particular, the Saucony Hurricane 24 has really stood out for me as a shoe I didn't really expect much of. I didn't really know if I was going to like it very much. I haven't used the Hurricane line before, and I don't tend to go for big, cushy stability shoes like this, but it has just a really enjoyable ride, I found. Like, it runs a lot lighter than it is. You've got a really nice rocker on the shoe, and I just found it very easy to get in sync with it and just tick over. And even though it's a big shoe, it has a little bit of spring to it. The foam is soft, but never too cushy, that in a way that would annoy me sometimes with very soft shoes. So all in all, I found it a really good shoe to run in, and it's one I go back to when I'm not testing other shoes for my recovery runs in particular. And the Glycerin Max has got a really nice rockered ride as well. It is noticeably soft at the heel. I'd say it's a bit softer than the Hurricane there, and then it does firm up a little bit as you roll through your foot strike to get a little bit more response off the forefoot. I'd say it is a more versatile shoe than the Hurricane. It has a little bit more responsiveness in it. I've gone out and done a 30k easy steady long run in the Glycerin Max and progressed the pace a little bit in the shoe. Last 10k was done at a steady pace, and that's not something I'd really want to do in the Hurricane, but at the same time I didn't absolutely love doing it in the Glycerin Max either. Like, it did feel like a bit too much shoe at the end of that, and I think it really does excel at the same kind of runs as the Hurricane, which is those easy runs, recovery runs, kind of general daily training. I did a run wearing both shoes at the same time, and as I mentioned, I do think the Brooks is a bit softer at the heel for sure, and then they both have noticeable rockers, but I think the Brooks, which I didn't notice so much when I was running it by itself, just feels a bit blockier than the Hurricane actually when it comes to the rocker, and I think it might just be the way they're shaped at the forefoot there. I think you've got a longer, gradual rocker on the Hurricane, which I find just makes it quite easy to flow with the shoe. With the Brooks, it's quite a sharp, a rocker at the end of the shoe there, and most of the forefoot is very thick and high, so I think, yeah, it doesn't feel quite as smooth to me as the Hurricane does. And the Hurricane having that slightly firmer foam at the heel actually, for me, kind of smooths out the transition to the foam at the forefoot, which is kind of equally firm, whereas you do get a softer feeling and a slightly different sensation with the Brooks, which is nice, but yeah, I do think you get a slightly smoother and more natural ride from the Hurricane as a result. But they both do feel very good, and like I said, I do think you get slightly more pop off the toes with the Brooks, but neither are shoes I'd class as versatile myself.
So in terms of my running time in these two shoes, I've done well over 50k in both, and I would say that my experience across the board has been very good. It was a couple of runs early on with the Hurricane 24. I wasn't 100% sure I'd love the shoe, but actually it's worked very well for me over time. It's actually been one of my favourite kind of, max cushion shoes. That definitely, like the Glycerin Max, is less super trainer, more kind of easy recovery style shoe. And those are the types of runs that I would grab these shoes for. Now, the first thing to say is that, as I alluded to in the fit, they're both pretty broad fitting shoes. And I think what that does is you've got that big stack of cushioning, which, I think on both shoes is just plush enough for me. I think not too soft. A little bit resilience there, maybe a little bit more rebound and bounce in the Glycerin Max one, but it's spread on both of them across a pretty broad, wide platform. What that means and what that delivers is a very stable feel. And I think from start to finish in my runs, and even when you start to tire, I think, as I said, I think the Glycerin Max maybe gives you a touch more bounce and a touch more liveliness. So if that's something you want in your ride on your easy runs, then I think maybe the Glycerin Max just slightly edges it for me on that front. But I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of that feeling. Ultimately, you're getting a midsole that's very protective. I think it's very comfortable. I think there's also, coupled with that, a kind of gentle kind of rocker there that kind of rolls you through very nicely on both of these shoes. The big thing for me, I think the big difference for me I've seen is that you're maybe getting a little bit more life in that kind of cushioning from the Brooks Glycerin Max, which is also the slightly lighter shoe as well too. But actually the way it doesn't, for me, hasn't factored in massively. In terms of the outsole durability, both kind of focus that rubber on the key areas where they think you're going to land, and I think durability for me has looked very good. Gripping has looked very good. I think maybe you're going to get a touch more from the level of rubber you're getting on the Glycerin Max, but ultimately I think these are shoes that are going to withstand extended amount of running time and going to last you a good amount of time. So from that point of view, that's something I'm not really concerned about. So yeah, for me, shoes that are Stable shoes, first and foremost, are very comfortable, feel very consistent, and offer a nice feeling underfoot, which I think is just the right mix of plush and slightly responsive, or kind of firm and more resilient, I would say is probably the best word, which you kind of want for those longer, easy runs where you just want familiarity, I think, from start to finish, and that's ultimately what these two shoes give you. Which one should you go for? I'll get into that next.
Okay, my verdict on these two shoes. Tricky one because I really like both of these shoes, and they both do a very similar thing for what I want. I think when it comes down to why I would use these shoes, it's going to be those easy days. It's going to be those slightly longer sessions where I want something comfortable, where I'm not worried about pace. And it's going to be those long runs for marathon training where I want something that's going to keep my legs feeling comfortable and fresh for up to 32k, which is what I normally get to with my marathon training. I think both these shoes would tick the boxes for me on that. I think the big difference between these two shoes is probably the feel of that midsole foam. I think the Hurricane doesn't necessarily have a very energetic midsole foam. You get more of that consistent feeling of the running through the rocker design. It's got a very smooth transition and just move you along really nicely at a good consistent pace. I think there's a bit more to the midsole in the Brooks Glycerin Max. I think there's a little bit more energy return in it. It's a little bit softer, and it's a bit more fun to run in as well. And I'd definitely say that if I was going to do a tempo effort or something, I'm more likely to wear the Glycerin Max than I am the Hurricane 24. But you get a bit more stability in the Hurricane 24. So it's tricky. It's a bit of a trade-off. They're both shoes that I use for the same sorts of things, but both of them have benefits that the other one doesn't have. So if it came down to it, I think I'm going to say that I'd go for the Brooks Glycerin Max just because of the type of runner I am. I like a softer, bouncier midsole. Really like the Hurricane 24. It's one of my favourite shoes this year, but I'm more likely to pick up the shoe for the majority of my runs just because I like that sort of midsole a little bit more than the more stable midsole that you get in the Hurricane 24. Hurricane 24 isn't a ridiculously firm shoe. It's not noticeably a stability shoe, but I think there's just a little bit more in the Brooks Glycerin Max for my style of running.
So my vote is whether you should go for the Saucony Hurricane 24 or the Brooks Glycerin Max. Now, ultimately, these are very good max cushion, easy day shoes. One is cheaper than the other. The Hurricane 24 is about £20 cheaper in the UK than the Glycerin Max. I think ultimately they are designed for the same types of runs. I think, if you are thinking about price point, then I would go for the Hurricane 24. That's ultimately going to give you a similar experience and give you all those kind of qualities you want from a max cushion easy day shoe. It's pitched as a stability shoe, but ultimately I'm a neutral runner and I've had no problems getting on with that, so don't let that rule it out for you. I think the big thing you're getting from the Glycerin Max, I think, over the Hurricane 24 is maybe a slightly more pronounced kind of bouncier kind of feel underfoot, which if you prefer that in a recovery, easy day shoe, then I think that's what it's going to get you here over the Hurricane 24. And again, if it was my money, I'd be going to the Hurricane 24. Save yourself a little bit of money, go for this shoe. It's going to work for the same types of runs as the Glycerin Max and give you a really comfortable, stable, controlled feeling for your short runs and your long runs.
So comes the verdict, this is a pretty easy one for me because I do like both of these shoes. I think they're both really good shoes, but I do like the Hurricane more, and it's also the cheaper shoe, especially in the US. It's substantially cheaper than the Brooks. So yeah, I would go for the Saucony Hurricane 24 out of these. I wouldn't be put off by the fact it's a stability shoe if you're a neutral runner. I'm a neutral runner. It's my favourite cushion shoe of the year so far. So yeah, all round, I think the Hurricane's a really good shoe to go for if you're just looking for something to hoover up a lot of mileage. If you are looking for a really cushioned daily trainer that you are going to use for some slightly faster efforts, I think the Glycerin Max does have a bit more versatility to it, but I wouldn't expect anything too remarkable from it on that front. It is still mainly a heavy, comfy shoe that's best used for cruising around in at relaxed paces. But yeah, good shoes. I'd go for the Hurricane myself. That's a comparison of the Hurricane 24 and the Glycerin Max. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.